everyone to this special call meeting on September 14th, 2020. And at this time, we'd like to do a moment of silence and the pledge. And the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 1 is review of the agenda, and item number 2 is adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda as written.
Who made that?
40.
40! Motion by Mr. Peardo, second by Mr. Richardson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Public comments. Public comments. Erin Newton.
I'm able to take this off to see. Here. Good evening, board members and Mr. Christie. My name is Erin Newton and I am a teacher at GRC. I would like to begin tonight by saying I agree with our back to school task force. The district should follow KDE guidelines and require mandatory mask and social distancing in our classrooms. This will keep kids, staff, the families of both, and our community safer than a model that only requires one of the two. I think the district did the right thing in measuring each classroom and producing social distancing guidelines. In order to ensure safety for everyone, I think it is important for schools to plan for reopening with these room-by-room social distancing thresholds in mind. If the document says a class can only have 12 students safely socially distanced in the room, then we should adhere to that number. Alternatively, I don't think it would be good to use only the total student capacity for each building in planning the reopening. While a school like GRC may be able to fit 1,100 kids in that building, that is only if every room were filled to capacity with students, and that's only if we had enough faculty to be in every room with those kids. We simply don't have that capability, even if all principals and counselors each took a room. I feel we should stick to the facts and figures and go by Mr. Stump's room-by-room analysis of social distancing. It's good we're planning to start with a hybrid model. It helps with health concerns and creates a safer situation than a full return model would. I think we should focus on coming up with a good return plan and give staff and families a minimum of 2 weeks, preferably 3, to transition back into the hybrid schedule. Additionally, I think we should consider pros and cons for sending different grade levels back to in-person classes. K through 6, particularly K through 2, have different needs and operate under different conditions than grades 7 through 12. K through 6 can stay with the same teacher and in the same room, much like the pod concept that KDE reopening guidance document suggested. Relatively self-contained educational pods allow outbreaks to be addressed in small groups due to minimize interactions in travel and school buildings, without an entire school being shut down. You can't do that as easily at RDC or GRC. The average GRC teacher sees about 140 to 150 kids on their caseload. Unless kids at GRC stay in pods with one teacher, rotating after 1 week or so, then middle and high schools are going to be much more likely to see school-wide spread of COVID-19. Another factor to think about is the degree to which middle and high school grade levels have incorporated flipped classroom models using Google Suite software and how that can help us make the hybrid model function more effectively. For years, PDs have instructed teachers to embrace technology and the internet in our classrooms. And for many of us, COVID-19 was the final straw that pushed us to embrace these technologies and practices. After some excellent trainings provided by the district leading up to day one of instruction, teachers now possess the capability to prep lessons, assignments, and assessments for students to do online at an individualized pace. This isn't busy work or a cheap alternative to lectures and lesson planning. This includes recorded lectures, lessons with embedded videos, and examples from the internet, lessons and documents with linked assignments and tests using dozens of apps and software, the ability for teachers and students to talk and share documents via virtual conferencing software, and the ability to seamlessly move from in-person to distant learning instruction with no changes required for prep or planning. Using the flipped classroom model and Google Suite, we can now use the same methods and provide the same quality of education to those students who are in classrooms for in-person instruction and those who are in full online instruction. However, we can only do this if we maintain the technology and internet capabilities necessary to do so. Chromebooks are a step in the right direction, but what good are Chromebooks if the Wi-Fi in a school won't support even half the kids logging into Google Classroom at the same time? In order to really make the hybrid plan work and allow us to give students at home and in our classrooms the same quality education, the schools need internet capacity to allow kids to use Google Suite programs at any time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I do not want to mess this up. Udesa?
I think she was
She's an auditor. Who is it? She's from Udesa.
Take this off one time. I just wanted to express my concerns about the kids and how much they need to be back in school. The kids are starting to have problems with isolation. They're not around their friends. They're not the schooling online is beyond frustrating. The systems aren't working the way they should. When you have a technical problem, we've got a lot of people, especially in this county, which I'm one of, grandparents raising their grandchildren, that we don't know enough about the computer to help our children get lost. Trying to get somebody on the phone to answer questions for you is like running a rat race. Been on the phone all day today. Call technical support, you get a prompt, it goes to another prompt, it goes to another prompt. I did get a hold of somebody in Pennsylvania today with a whole different school system after calling our junior high, going through the prompts. This system is not working. Our kids are suffering for it. I understand that COVID is a concern. I understand for elderly parents, elderly people with underlying conditions, it is very dangerous. I don't feel that there is that danger to the students. Most of our teachers in this county are not in an age group to where they're in high susceptibility. And I feel like they ought to let the kids that want to go to school and the parents that want to send their kids to school have that choice We send the kids to school. The kids that the parents don't feel comfortable, let them stay home. Let those teachers that don't feel comfortable going back to school, let them do virtual learning for the kids that are staying home. And let our children that need to be out and back in school go back to school. We're paying our taxes to pay salaries, to pay for a school system, for our children to be educated. A lot of us have sent our children to school to be educators. And now it's like, well, anybody can educate your kid because we're having to teach them. This virtual learning is not working. And I wanted to come out here and express my views as a grandparent. A lot of the people in this county, if their kids brought it home, their parents aren't in an age group that it's going to be dangerous for. I am. I'm willing to take that risk. And I think as a citizen with rights and freedoms, ought to have the choice, have the school system open and have the choice to send my child to school if I want to do that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Kim Smith.
Thank you all. I'm going to try not to let my emotions get the best of me here, so I've prepared what I would like to try to say here. I'm here today as a member of this community and parent of a second grader in support of in-person school. It is my understanding that it was mentioned at the September 8th meeting that parents like myself have not been showing up here, so here I am. If I am not here, it's because I have responsibilities to my child, family, community, and thought the board would do what it was elected to do with the information submitted by the surveys. This year I have been paying closer attention, saw you all considering the options, and hoped you would give parents the option. Nothing is perfect. You cannot make everyone happy. This is not easy for any of us. With the option, parents could choose what works best for their child's situation. Those that choose to distance learning would free up space to figure out a way to get those that choose in person to be socially distanced. If we let fear of this one thing prevent us from living, are we really living? My child has resumed swim lessons, started martial arts, attended a private school summer camp, etc., following guidelines with temperature checks, masks, etc., with minimal issues. We self-quarantined after we were notified of close contact with someone who tested positive and had no symptoms. Other public schools in Kentucky are doing in-person or the option. They figured out a way, so can we. I am one of 3 children raised by a hardworking single mother from a third world country with a 6th grade education. If our education depended on her to do it from home, we could not reach our full potential and stayed off government assistance. I have an undergraduate and graduate degrees, professional license, and 23 years in my profession, none of which are education. I am fortunate my profession and employer allowed me to work from home during this, but if I do not perform, I will not have a job. And our household income is cut in half. NTI last spring took an hour a day. Last week took 2 to 3 or more hours a day, causing me to work nights and this weekend, also in preparation to spend this evening here. I left a toxic work environment that did not have work-life balance to have it taken away, to spend the time with my child trying to teach things I was not trained for. I looked at what our other options were. Most are private, which my child had bad experiences, but turned out to be the last 6 months of 4.5 years at a private preschool pre-K. Even after no longer attending the school, I hired an attorney to help inform the board of what happened in hopes they would prevent those things from happening to someone else's child. I will never know because the laws that would protect my child apparently don't apply to them since they don't receive federal funding. But I did what I could to inform them. Unfortunately, the private school that my child has attended summer camp is too expensive during the school year, as they have shown that they care and can work with my child because it is right, not because the law makes them. The distance learning programs appear to be after-school programs, which didn't assist with schoolwork in the past, so I'm not sure about their qualifications to do so now. Justice Elementary, where my child attends, also has shown that they care and can work with my child in person, but currently they are not allowed to do so. I always appreciate what educators do. Please allow parents in our children's schools to give our children the education which they deserve by at least giving parents the option of in-person school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comments. And now we are on to item number 3. Discussion of plans to begin the process of in-person school. Scott Hodgson's got your name beside it, so I guess we'll let you start.
All righty, thank you. I've attended the two task force meetings so far and very much appreciate the people that have served on that committee. And one of the things that Mr. Christie said at the beginning of the last meeting that he and I are in 100% agreement is that it's our goal to get kids and staff back in school as soon as possible and as safe. And in determining that date is not the task that's permitted to us today. That'll be at a different meeting. But I felt, as I expressed at the last meeting, that it was important for us to be reviewing those plans for an eventual and hopeful return to in-person school. So I thought it would be useful to start talking about that now. So as we get to that point, and then the plans will be fine-tuned, we'll be ready to go whenever that date comes about. And hopefully tonight we can have a free-flowing exchange of ideas, and we acknowledge that the plans that have been put in front of us are drafts. They're not going to be perfect at this point in time. There's certainly a lot of our educators, and there's quite a number in this room, and I very much appreciate you all taking time out of your evening to come out tonight. You get your hands full, with the challenges of the virtual school that we have right now. So I think we need to just acknowledge that the plans are still in process, hopefully not be critical of the plans, but at the same time we can have an open discourse and express opinions as to what we think about the plans, pros and cons, and try to tweak those and give the superintendent and staff our feedback to the extent we're able to, either on a consensus basis or a straw poll or a nodding head or something like that. So you all can be fine-tuning the plans some more, so when we do get to that point of in-person school, we're ready to go. So that was my hope for tonight, and certainly my name it happens to be there on the agenda, but I think it's the agenda, the agenda item of all the board members, in hope to try to help working together to fine-tune this for our district. And again, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and I really think, absent of comments of other board members, certainly jump in here, then maybe we can start with Mr. Christie to see what his thoughts are and how he would like to go. But certainly I don't want to preclude any of the other board members from having any preface remarks either.
I agree totally with much of what Mr. Heisel said. My intentions all along were to try to figure out how we were going to plan to get a reopening. As it stands right now, I think our reopening date that we passed the last time, November 8th, 9th, somewhere in there, Mr. Holland, 9 weeks is what we said. what my whole goal and intention was is to make sure that we were working at this and we were on the timeline, that I didn't walk in here on the 21st and be handed 10 pages of paper that I've never reviewed, and I haven't reviewed these, and these may answer many of the questions that I have. I don't know, because I just received those tonight, so maybe by next week a lot of these questions can be answered. And my biggest questions that I have are regarding transportation and how we're going about that, if we're monitoring and amending our plans all the time. I see we got new governor stuff here today. Are we going back and reviewing plans that schools have submitted, giving schools feedback on those? I would like to know if all of the needs and questions that schools put at the end of their plans, have they been answered? Are those people satisfied with those answers? I know many of the plans that we had there were done before the thermal imaging was done, had plans went back and reviewed for that. We did hear someone speak about a hybrid plan tonight, so I'm assuming we've been talking about something along those lines. I don't know how this plan works, but I'm sure that can be explained to us sometime. And all the costs that are associated, those are the big things that I have with the board, what costs are going to be associated with coming back as a hybrid plan. Also about surveys, I know I did read where on the notes the COVID task force talked about developing their own surveys. I would caution against that, simply because we got a lot of feedback, negative feedback on the way surveys were done before. I'd really like to look at some of our professional organizations that we subscribe to and see if those plans will fit during this time, and see how long the turnaround is for them to get those things back to us. And we've been in virtual for about a week. I would like to hear what Mr. Christie's timeline, if he was planning on coming back in school that second week of November, how he thought that was going to play out through there. So those are my comments, and I'll pass them to another board member.
Is that what you want him to start and answer?
Well, I just figured that board members could say what they needed to say, and then we could get some response from Mr. Christie. And
yeah, I have a lot of those same questions, and maybe they are in here, we can have our questions answered, but could you go over just the high points so we can see where we are on things?
Well, the plan that you see, the back to school reopening plan, that's a very skeletal document. There are things in there that are just placeholders right now. When it talks about some of the food services and some of those things that are just a small snippet of things put in there. That's going to be counted upon us next week. We plan on all the areas touching on this back to school in each area, what's going to happen. Where we are right now, let me tell you where we are and kind of why we're where we are. We are looking now, I think we're ready to start the real open discussions about coming back. If you watch the governor today, they said there's going to be no more directives from the State House to close or not to close. But then Dr. Stack came up, followed up later, said if things got worse, there would be. So still some mixed conversation there. But fortunately, when just what little bit I've got to listen to it today, and what he talked about isn't really off from what we were going to present to you tonight anyway. We have a plan. He's got 4 lights, we went 3 lights. We kind of combined the yellow and the orange that they're talking about in their plan. We have a red, and for us, in the red, and we talked about how we get to those, in the red was all virtual. That's where we are right now. That's when we don't feel like it's safe to have the in-person classes. That's where we started, that's why we started where we are. And we said we would be there the first 9 weeks, but we would be reassessed monthly. We combined the yellow and the orange to stay in yellow. And yellow is the plan where we can start to bring students back. Not everybody, but we still have the option of virtual for those who want it in the yellow plan. And we bring back, it's an A-B hybrid, is what it is. And then by A-B hybrid, we mean that anyone who wants to return, but we're going to divide that group in half. And we'll probably do that alphabetically and by household, realizing that there's going to be some conversations with parents and guardians in the household. You can't just divide your student population A to J and K to Z and expect it to work out that way. There's going to be situations, and we have to be fluid in this, where we divide it out equally. And the reason we're having to divide it is one reason and one reason only. As long as we have to maintain 6 feet of spacing between students in the building, in the classroom, there is not enough room to bring back all the students at once. It's that simple. Our buildings, when you go in, and we've gone through every single classroom, every gymnasium, every cafeteria, every library, every auditorium, everything in our district, and we've calculated by the formulas exactly what 6 feet of spacing looks like, and how many students each of those can be at capacity. I think I sent you all the document that showed every building and every room in each of them. So you can see what the capacity of the building is, but you can see what the capacity of the building is socially distanced. That's what we've got to meet. We feel that we'll take out the students who want to remain virtual, and I can't give you that percentage. Before, it's about 35%. I don't know if that's what it'll be right now. So we're going to have to, and we'll talk about how we're going to do that, but we're going to have to determine who wants to still stay out. And if there's 75% of the student body wants to return, we know we can't take them all at once, so we're going to have a hybrid, an AB. The hybrid, on our case, the AB, once they're divided, the A group will come to class on Monday and Tuesday in person, just like a regular school day, only there'll be 6 feet of spacing, and they'll be masked the entire time. And we'll meet all CDC guidelines and put them in place for us in transportation, food services, all those areas in the buildings. But it's going to be a regular in-class instructional day. For the remaining group, on Wednesday, everybody will be virtual. We chose that way because we felt like that instructional, back-to-back instructional days of Monday and Tuesday, if you're only going to be there a partial week, felt like being there 2 days back-to-back is more instructionally sound than in a day, out a day, in a day, out a day, that kind of thing. So it's 2 days of instruction with the same group of students on Monday and Tuesday. The other group is doing virtual like they're doing now. On Wednesday, it's virtual for everybody. That allows us to do many things. Sanitize the building, go back to the cleanup of the building. In those spaces, those classroom spaces where those students on AB group receive at the desk, we can now go in and sanitize those, prepare them for the second group to come in on Thursday, Friday. So everybody gets 2 days in class and 1 day or 3 days of virtual. And again, that's because of the social distancing. The transportation pickup for that is going to look like it would on any day. Start off with, we'll run our regular bus routes picking up those students. Now, as we start to pick them up, and we can probably eliminate a lot of stops knowingly up front. But we don't know. I can't tell you right now that if we divide the student population of those who want to come back in half, I can't tell you which bus stops right off the top of my head are going to be eliminated. We have to look at the population as we populate the bus routes to see which ones we can eliminate. I think we can probably pare down some of our routes and do that, and not have to run as many routes to bring in half of them. We can pare them up some to do that. So I think we can cut some on transportation costs there to do that while we're bringing everybody in. I've got all the principals here tonight. I've got all my staff here to talk about any parts of this. I gave you a handout that kind of describes what I just showed you. I think it looks like this one. That's what we're doing. That's in comparison. That's actually what a daily schedule would look like. And there's another one around one like this that shows, and all this will be incorporated into this document that we're putting together. And inside the document, as we reference any of these, or any websites where it talks about CDC guidelines or anything, those are going to be hyperlinked to where when you see that, you'll have a click, you can click on it, and you can go get all the guidelines from those, either from our website or from CDC's website. I sent you also a document, the minutes from the last meeting of the COVID task force. You'll see in there the recommendations. I highlighted those in yellow in your document. That was the recommendations at this point that this group, COVID group, has come up with that they thought were important. Now, since that meeting, as of today, the document was presented to us from the governor's office about those measurements and how to report. So that I think where they're going with that is going to give you the numbers that we need to actually look at that's going to be specific to our district. But I have not looked at the document. It was on the TV screen. That's as close as I've got to look at it. I sent you the link that has those documents in it. I just sent you that. It's the link to the webinar tomorrow for superintendents to go through all these documents that he presented today. you have that link. In that link, there are three. There's the one that I just copied for you, this one. I copied this one for you. There's two other documents. One of them is the reporting document. It sounds like now we're going to be obligated to report to the state numbers of COVID positives, staff and students, numbers of quarantined staff, students. That's information that I won't have. That's information that's going to have to come from the health department to us, and probably from parents as they report students not being able to attend class because of being, we're going to have to track those. I don't know how that part's going to work yet. Just got that today, but I do think, looking at it and listening to it in that short 2 or 3 minutes he talked about, I think it's going to be information. It's going to be a lot of the same kinds of things that we were talking about in the COVID task force about wanting to know what the positivity rate, the infection rate, and all those things. It's going to be very low. I think that's going to be a help for us to determine, according to the plan here, when you get to certain points of what takes you back and forward. We're in the virtual right now. We've only been in it a few days. I personally think it's going very, very good. I know there are some who still are having some problems. We try to deal with those individually. I will tell you that those have been very limited to me, that's come to me. Now, principals here, they can tell you they've been getting them. I know the two that we had like come in last night and today, those have been addressed with those individuals. So I think the teachers are well prepared to do what we're doing right now. And I feel fine with going forward with this until we can come in, until you guys decide when you want to bring students back in. I would tell you that it's going to take us 2 to 3 weeks to go from where we are to being back in person. The reasons for that, just working on the transportation piece, getting the registration part done, getting food in. You're talking probably to go from virtual to in person. You're talking, and Becky's here can answer questions if you have those, probably 2 to maybe 3 weeks to get the food in. It's a completely different meal program of in-person versus what's out. Now, if you want, we maybe could speed that up a week if we say for the first 2 weeks, we're going to feed them bagged lunches like we do on the delivery routes right now. If you want to continue that in the school, we could probably knock a week off, off the comeback time there for that. So that's the A-B schedule. I'll like take any questions on that part of it.
So, I looked on KDE's website today and the back to school, platform that program that we're trying to follow. But it didn't see anywhere on there where it said the 6 foot in the classroom is either recommended or required. Is it recommended or required?
It's required. Mr. Heisler, you want to share your email?
I got an email, asked Ms. Kissick this question. I think though that she has an incomplete reading of what their document says. So, the back to school guideline, this document on page 7, it says safety expectations must be implemented. Okay, so we're with the must. I think we can agree on that. Staggered arrival, increase space between students by rearranging seating to maximize the space between students to be 6 feet or greater. So it says that in bullet point number 2. However, bullet point number 3 goes on to say specifically, if the physical space in the school does not allow for spacing students' desks 6 feet apart, space desks as far away as possible. All desks should be arranged so that students' seats face the same direction, and use of cloth face masks is a safety expectations for all students and staff at all times unless medically waived. So the expectation is, number 1, that it be 6 feet. But it says specifically, if you can't do 6 feet, here's what you need to do. Tying that into the CDC guidelines on page 8 of 15 says, space seating a desk at least 6 feet apart when feasible. So if they didn't intend the word when feasible to be in there, they wouldn't have put it in there. So I think the goal is to try to get them 6 feet apart. But unless I'm reading this document, which was dated August 31 incorrectly, it acknowledges there's an if in there, and if you can't do it, it gives you an alternate plan.
Yeah, I would just think some districts across the state, and I'm not saying I'm in favor one way or the other, I think it would be really difficult for them to do a hybrid model. Have kids in, have kids out, financially. But, that's the safest way. I just wanted to get a clarification if that's
The reply that I got from Ms. Kissick, who got this from Dr. White, Associate Commissioner for the Department of Public Health, said, I'll stick with the first part, it says, as outlined in this guidance, social distancing is a safety expectation in accordance with CDC guidance and must, underlined, must be implemented by schools. As such, student seating should be arranged to maximize space between students to be 6 feet or greater in accordance with the CDC guidance. 6 feet of physical space is a minimum. Greater social distance is always preferred.
If Dr. White want to invent policy, I think it needs to be reduced to something that's in writing.
And I agree, but that's just, I want to be transparent with everything we got. It's not just, they didn't just question that. I mean, they went back and readdressed it. I plan on getting something, and that's why we're where we are.
And I didn't mean to be critical of you in that last comment there 15 seconds ago, but since we're talking about that she asked like something, it could be that's their stance, but I think until they actually translate that into a document and get rid of this big if, and I think if they get rid of this if, all these people have already started schools, I just can't believe that all these school districts that have started are able to maintain 6 foot spacing.
It's very frustrating to have to read something like that and have them talking about 6 foot spacing in a classroom, yet we can turn around on a bus and when everybody's masking, we can put 78 on an enclosed bus. It's very frustrating.
So just to follow up on that, we've got what the committee is working on. I know the board hasn't had a chance to look at that yet. There's like a green, you mentioned it, green, yellow, and red light. And then the state comes out with this new platform that they're going to be rolling out for local decisions to be made after the 28th. What if we're in a green district? What if we're green or yellow? Do we still have to follow the KDE guidelines of 6 feet? I mean, if we're green, can we go back?
That's a question I intend on asking. Mr. Holland and I have already talked about watching this today. That's a question we've got for tomorrow to find out.
As soon as the thing starts, you can type into a sandbox. I've got 3 questions I'm typing into a sandbox to have ready, because the things that they said today leads us down a different path, and they need to specify with it. So they'll lump those questions together, and I guarantee you'll have 7 or 8 that generate with that, and they'll have to answer that quickly.
And I don't want to speak I am on the task force, and I don't want to speak for task force, because we do have a chairperson for that. But I think, that's some of the difficulty is trying to put criteria together when it's statewide criteria that we don't have. I mean, that we don't have local. But the way they talk today, that there will be local data that we'll be able to see daily and weekly and be able to either bring, if we were back to school and we all of a sudden saw a spike and we can make a decision to, go back to virtual for a time period and then go back and forth if need be. I mean, that's what I got out of it.
Yes, I did as well.
I think if you look in that document that I sent you that we're going to be discussing tomorrow at the superintendent's webinar with them, there's one, it wasn't the one that I printed, I think it was the first one, and it was the one that creates that dashboard that's made up of all local data. I think that's going to be the one that's going to be key to us, but it's all local data.
And that dashboard,
that
will be on our website for everyone to see.
Yes, and they'll start, I think the 24th, it's going to start coming out every Thursday. So you have that ability to have that on Thursday, and if something happened, you would have the ability to make a decision to go back to your all virtual plan on the following Monday. And it's designed where you can be going back and forth.
Would you say it's easier to fall back to virtual than it is to go from virtual to in
Yes.
person?
Well,
because I know if we were all in school and we had to go back to virtual, the food that we probably could purchase there'd be a big waste there. But is there anything else that would,
I think it's important that we get this time that we're getting, that we use wisely, these teachers use wisely in learning to do this virtual platform, because I think there is that possibility, whether it's for COVID or whether it's for flu or snow, for 2 or 3 days of snow, we could go back to an all virtual platform. I think now we're looking at going to a virtual platform versus a NTI type thing now. I think we're always going to be on a virtual platform. We're not going to be talking NTI days. We're going to be talking a virtual platform. And I think once we get back into session, and we get things worked out there, if it's an A-B hybrid and we have to deal with this, if we do have to deal with the 6 feet, and if we don't have to deal with the 6 feet, we're talking about a different kind of a game here. because now we could go back to an offering of anyone who wants to come back versus those who want to remain virtual, because we could handle the capacity of a 65 or 75% of our student body back in our buildings. We could handle that. And it sounds like we're going to be dealing with masks for a while. I think the 6-foot spacing and getting that question answered is the next biggest key to what we can do, to how much we can roll back into the school. But at this point, I'm still looking at the hybrid AB with only 50% population coming back in, or a max of 50%. It's going to be less than 50 because a certain percentage is going to stay virtual. It'll be 50% of those who want to come back we can work with on the 2 days a week basis. But that's solely because of the 2 or the 6 feet space that we just can't accommodate more than 50% in our buildings.
Well, hopefully they'll address the 6 feet and make it more clear within the next week, because I think that does change the game a lot.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow.
We're going to start on it tomorrow.
Because
And
the documentation they have right now puts an if there, that if you can't do it, this is what you do. And again, I don't want to be critical of you, because obviously what you said is what Kissick passed along with what Pat said. But I think we need to be operating for our 5,000 students plus our valued teachers and staff on real pronouncements that are put down in writing.
And we read it the same way you did the first time we looked at it. And after contacting state CDC and everything, that was the answer we got, and I had to maintain the 6 feet. 6 feet means 6 feet. And that's why we're where we are, and that's why we're going along the path that we're going now with the hybrid AB, only because they told us. Now, it's not been changed in a document. I mean, it came up in a superintendent's webinar when they spoke like they did here, that this is going to be the requirement. But in their document, they said ifs and those things. And we questioned it back then, and that's why we're where we are now, because when they did clarify it in person, they said it's the 6 feet. And if we can get something to back up on that, then we got a different conversation.
So if you push them, or if you get an answer from them and say, show me in writing where there's a published policy that essentially nixes this if part, then it would be logical, it would be only mathematically logical that you would go down the alternate AB path, because that's the only way we could mathematically do it. However, if they say, no, it's still just a recommended guideline, what would your thoughts be then?
The easiest thing for us would be if we get to a safe enough, healthy enough situation where we can we're either all virtual, or the parents have a choice of virtual, or the parents have a choice to come back. I'm for getting to a parent choice. That's where I want to get to. But I want to make sure that we're able to follow the guidelines and do it safely. But I'm for a parent choice of either send my child back to school, that'd be for everybody at the same time, or we do all virtual if we're not at a point where we can do that, but still giving the option for virtual for those who want to stay virtual, even if we're able to bring everybody back. But we've not had the conversation about bringing everybody back. Once we got the directive that 6 feet means 6 feet.
In the last survey, 30%, was it 30%? What was the percentage?
35, 30, it was about 60. I want to say 63%. I don't have a figure right in front of me. I think 63%, 37%.
So you're only looking at a 13% difference.
That's a big difference when you're talking,
Yeah, that's true.
the number that we're talking about in the bill.
Mr. Christie, by next week, will you have those numbers of how many students, how many teachers?
That's our plan.
And how those students, once they commit, I'm assuming we'll have some sort of policy once you commit one way or the other. With that, one thing I would say there with the teachers, the discussion between Mr. Talby and Mr. Heisel about the distancing, I think that's going to be a big difference in how you ask teachers. I think you're going to have some teachers that are going to want to come in. If it's a 6-foot distancing, you're going to have some teachers that are not going to come in. And the worst thing in the world that we can do is they show up one day and say, oh, that doesn't matter anymore, because teachers need to know that before they go back in, and hopefully we have that answered in a way by next week.
I agree.
So looking at the plans for going back in, we've looked at other spaces. I take it like the gym and the library.
And we'll need those spaces. Of course, you're going to need your cafeteria and probably your, like at the high school in Campbell, you're going to need your gym space, like up above at Campbell, and you're going to need either in the second gym there on the main floor. We're going to use that as a cafeteria piece too. There's going to be tables set up in there so that we can feed the kids. And we don't have to do all the meals in the rooms. We're going to do breakfast in the rooms. But lunches right now with the principals, with this A-B hybrid plan, we're able to look at maybe scheduling and getting everybody through the cafeterias. But if not, we've got alternate places in the larger schools to set up tables. We already have the tables in our possession we can set up and we can serve in 2 different places.
But they'll go back to their, sorry, they'll go back to their room, is that what you said?
No, they'll eat breakfast in the rooms.
In the room.
Yes.
So then where will they eat lunch? 'Cause that was
In the cafeteria and or in the space up above the gym there at Campbell. There's some space for tables there, or in the auxiliary gym at the high school. And we've even looked at the space behind the bleachers in the new gym. There's a huge space there when those bleachers are full forward that you could see tables in there, and that could be a lunchroom space too.
But given that they'll have to obviously take masks off to eat.
Obviously, they take masks, and that's right now under the CDC guidance, the way we're reading it, the way we're interpreting it, that's the only time that masks can come off. is
Right, so
for
the 6
eating
foot
and drinking.
spacing I would think would have to be.
And that's in their guidelines for eating and drinking.
So is that gonna require more time? Because I mean, like in the elementaries?
Well, it may a couple minutes, yeah, because it's depending on if they serve, when they go through the lines, like they do in the regular service lines, they can't serve themselves and things, everything has to be, plates stay behind, the plates are filled, everything, the cook put everything on, so the student, we hand them their condiments, we would hand them their napkins, their plastic wrapped forks and spoons, things like that would be handed to them, that no one reaches in and gets anything out, it's all done to the cooks and handed to them at the end of the line.
Right.
As they go down the line, they would choose what they wanted to cook, put it on, and go
Right.
down the line and get it.
I understand, I'm talking about the spacing though. If you're gonna have to separate them, do the 6 feet in the cafeterias. Obviously, it's gonna take more tables for those kids. Instead of having a classroom take up 1 table in elementary, it's gonna be, what, 2 tables?
It's going to be scheduling, and it's going to be alternate sites set up for serving. And it's going to take some scheduling on the school's part.
So I know it's early on, but have we had any feedback from schools that have gone back to in-person hybrid plan or otherwise?
The group that I meet with regularly, none of them have gone back. There are some that start to talk about the end of this month, first of next month. Montgomery, I think, may be talking about the 28th possibly. That's about the earliest I think that any of them are.
And you think that's doable, maybe the 28th or the 5th?
28th is going to be difficult.
Yeah,
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult because of getting the information we need on the students at this point and getting, well, we got to get an answer on the 6 foot space.
Right.
It would be much easier. It would be much easier if we didn't have to deal with the 6 foot space. If they were saying that, if you can maintain 6 feet if you can. If you can't, as long as they're masked, you can do less. That's going to make it an easier task. That does not eliminate the food service problem, getting the food in.
One more question. Do you know when the health department is talking about the positivities, does she take into consideration just school-age children, or is it across the board? When we're looking at getting back to
I'm not sure
in-person.
who from the health.
The positivity rate does not factor in age at all. She can give us statistics, but that is not included into the positivity rate.
Okay.
It doesn't play, what you're saying is it doesn't play, it's a case is a case.
Yeah.
A positive is a positive.
But she does have it broken down into
Yes,
ages.
she does.
Yeah.
She presented, it should be in your document, your minutes that I gave you from our meeting. The health department did a report for us and gave us a breakdown of every age all the way across the board. It should be in the documents that I supplied you.
It's a really good document, if you get a chance to look at it, because it is broken down. And if you can see there's been a, uptick in certain age groups.
Mhm.
Is that the deck you're talking about?
To that,
We
yes.
didn't get a copy of the deck, so maybe we could request a copy of the slideshow deck.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Mr. Christie, I would suggest that someone, and maybe building principals, have talked to their teachers about who's comfortable, who's not comfortable. I can't imagine on the high school level and the junior high level, I've got 10 math teachers that don't want to come back, and what does that create for you? And I appreciate your 2 to 3 week turnaround, but I tell you, that's a pretty lofty goal right there to be able to get that. I mean, the scheduling on that high school and junior high right now, if they don't know, I mean, it'd be nice and sweet if you knew you had one from every department that wasn't there, but you know, that could be skewed in different ways. You may have 10 English teachers, 3 math, and that's going to really affect how they go about scheduling. And just scheduling when you've got everything perfect takes quite a while. So I would say as soon as we can figure that out, and maybe principals already know that, they're already counting on that, but I still believe that that's the biggest issue. I don't think it's a hard issue to ask students who wants to come back. It's what teachers we're going to have available and how that's going to be handled, you know, on the district level.
Well, and I think along that same line, when we do talk to the students, and we got to have that same conversation, same type of thing with teachers, knowing if we come back, we're going to be coming back. If it's 2 days a week and 3 virtual, you got to put the exact schedule out so that they can base their decision on that exact schedule. Because their decision right now is based on the schedule that we're under right now. And I think Scarlett not in here right now. Oh, we got, how many we got district-wide right now that's requested? Virtual, not in person?
Certified and classified, probably 12, 14. And then sometimes it's requested virtual just for some quarantine time.
Yeah.
And then come back to face-to-face. I have a spreadsheet with everybody on it.
But that seems like a low number, but I think you're right, that could change when they know an exact number of days and how many students are going to be working. That could change.
And I would foresee, and I'm assuming you could do it, that possibly your virtual teacher won't be the same as your in-person teacher.
Yes.
Is that what principals come back, you would see something like that? I know I read some things about teachers and record and those type of things, but you probably got guidance counselors out there right now that are probably your heads are busted right now thinking about how to get this done right now.
If someone is quarantined, doesn't necessarily mean that they can't still work. They can maybe work from home and do the virtual piece because they can do that at home. So that's one of the things that we always take into consideration when those teachers have to be quarantined or those kinds of things. That Scarlett does a good job working with them on that, working with the principals and trying to still utilize those people. We've surveyed the substitute teachers. We know how many substitute teachers we have that are willing to come in to work in person with students.
Have we considered making them full-time and assigned to school?
Well, we haven't yet because...
One of the questions I would have is that, you know, we talk about, all right, student comes in, he's got 100.4, they go to this room. What happens when the teacher comes in, they're 100.4 and they've got 50 math students for that day? You got a sub there waiting for them? You know, and then if that person is taking kids directly to the room, who takes them directly to the room at that time? I think there's a lot of questions, and I think it would really be good if we had people we knew that wanted to be subs, that they're assigned to some places like that, so that, you know, that's free flowing and you don't have a group of 15 kids waiting for their homeroom teacher or however we're creating that. So lots of things to talk about, I know, and then we'll miss half of them and never know what we're missing. So.
Well, I'm glad for a conversation, to be honest with you, because I need to know, you all are thinking of some stuff, I mean, that we hit on, but we need to drill a little deeper on some of these things.
Can I touch on what Mr. Perry was saying? I want to advocate on behalf of the students, the teachers, the principals, the district staff, and just say, that's our big thing. When we talk about things and we're talking as a group, I think everybody acknowledges that we want to get back in and we want to get back in as quickly as possible, but I think what Mr. Perry was saying is kind of key too. And that's where our mindset is. When we go back, we don't want to go back and be just pretty good at it. We want to be given the time to have everything in place that we can be great at it. And that's the thing that I think that we want to ask when the board is considering the dates of when they go back, is just that consideration, because we want to get back in and we want to get back in with them, but we want to have that opportunity to build that foundation to be as good as we possibly can.
I appreciate that sentiment, but I'm not sure we want to delay the rate, because that implies that in terms of balance, that the virtual model that we have right now is satisfactory to hold off to them. I think y'all have done a great job on the virtual model. I've heard a lot of, certainly people criticizing it, but I think y'all done a great job of rolling it out. But I would encourage y'all not to hold off till you have the in-person plan at perfection, because I think on balance, I don't want to give up a little bit of perfection on that plan to be able to get kids back in school.
So my comment was more, if you're thinking of October 5th, please give consideration that a week would do us much more good to strengthen our plan. Is it that detrimental to lose the 5 days than what we can gain to become stronger of what it was? And that's where that comment was designed, not to flush it out for several weeks that much longer, just to give us some time to really try to get it.
So, Mr. Christie, back to, I guess, the key question we need to get answered ASAP from the guys at the state, and gals, sorry, I'm old time, is on the 6-foot rule. We've got to get, because that changes everything. If they say it's a guideline, strive for it, do the best you can, but if you can't, we understand nobody in the West is doing it anyhow. Like, well, thanks a lot for misleading me, guys. And if that's their answer, then I'm assuming, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, that you'll, if they say just a guideline, then you would then say, let's scrap this 2-day on, 1 day off, 2-day on plan.
You would certainly open the conversation up there. I'm not going to say tonight that if that happened tomorrow, if we found out that 6 feet means as close to it as you can get, and if you have to 4 feet would work, that would allow us to bring more in. I'm not saying that we would just automatically scrap, but I'm saying it gives us a lot more opportunity to talk about other options.
It actually gives you an opportunity to, if everyone goes back, you could go back Monday and Tuesday, do virtual Wednesday, clean the schools again, kind of like the AB plan, then go back Thursday and Friday. It's just an option.
Yeah.
It's, it's.
You could spend more days in school.
I mean, it's something to discuss, I would think.
If the 6 was not mandatory, my personal preference would be to try to get, to not do an AB type of schedule. I think it's too challenging and has a lot of problems. Now, that's the only thing that's available to us. For other reasons down the road, I guess we'll have.
I think that's the reason,
that just
the
one man's
AD,
opinion.
if you look, and I didn't print it out for you, but I had a list that Scarlett helped me with. We talked to 18, I think, different districts. And the largest percentage of them that were coming back, many in-person was coming back in the same thing that we're calling the hybrid AB, and it's for the same reason that we are. So there are others that's got the same interpretation of it that we do. But that's why I think you're seeing the AB, is because they just don't have space for everybody.
Obviously, we don't want to beat this up too much. It's critical to get an answer to that question.
Circling back to the substitutes, the substitute teachers, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I think Gordy and I will probably get ready to go on the same thing, so go and then I'll let Gordy go.
Just circle back, I know there's standards that, requirements for substitutes. Can we, or should we consider Lauren, certain
We
requirements?
can't. Those standards are set by professional standards board as far as what,
This is kind of not a typical
it can be anywhere from
year.
They have to have at least 64 college hours and a 2.5 GPA, but we really have a
Pretty good.
is that what we're asking?
Yeah.
We have a pretty good list of subs. Actually, we called everyone this week. There were around 95. Of the 95, we spoke with them personally. 47 are willing to come back on an AB hybrid. And 50, the remainder were willing to come back virtually. Right now, the principals that I talk to aren't typically getting subs when people are out right now because they really don't want people roaming around their buildings that don't exactly know what they're doing. Today, we did have a sub in Shear, and it was a big help to Mr. Kennedy because he had a teacher out, but he used that sub to help him do, there were lots of chores that had to be done today.
We had our materials drop-off pickup for the kids.
And we have 4 people on with long-term subs right now, and those are going very well. So today we had 5 substitutes in the buildings.
there were more of the substitutes willing to come back than there were virtual. And that goes probably in line with a lot of our subs are retired teachers, and virtual teaching is difficult. It's not an easy thing to do it good. It's not easy. And these teachers that have retired haven't been through the hours and hours and hours of training we put our teachers through this summer to do the virtual piece, so they're not comfortable with it. And I think that's why you see a larger part of them said that they weren't interested in subbing during virtual time.
Well, you know, when you got a day here and a day there, it's very difficult to come into a virtual setting. Where I was a sub and I was a teacher for 17 years, I could go in and wing it in a classroom. I don't know that I could wing it in Google if I were going in a day here and a day there, you know. But the long-term ones are doing very well.
So you feel comfortable with the level of substitutes we
The
have?
number, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't think there'd be anything in the world wrong with hiring one for each school that's a permanent sub. It's gonna be very expensive, you know, with benefits and it's expensive, but if you all gave me the go-ahead to do that, I'd certainly put that out there, and I bet the principals would appreciate it. But I don't know if it's whether it's necessary. We're never gonna know till the end of this thing whether it worked or not, you know, but I haven't talked to any other districts that are doing it, but that doesn't mean they're not.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Curto.
Oh, well, I was just, I know we're getting into, sometimes we get into the weeds so much. I think it is important to know that we as a board don't develop a plan. Mr. Christie and his staff develop a plan, and we look at this kind of stuff and say, we think it's safe enough for them to go. So hybrid, whatever else that they come with, or if they say 4 foot, 6 foot, or whatever, if Mr. Christie has backup that says that we can do that, then I think that's the plan that we go with if we say it's safe. Our responsibility as a board is to make sure our policies are being followed, and our policies are going to be about the safety of the students. And if we have questions about that, that's one thing, and getting into whether we do a hybrid or whatever else is going to be difficult, even a 4 foot or 6 foot. I think we have to come back and say, I can't approve this because this is what it says. That's the way I kind of see it.
One of the big expenses that you all put forth on the safety was the thermal imaging. I want to tell you, we've tested that in the building, and the tests are phenomenal, what we're seeing with it. We were able to run, and we actually asked some teachers, and they had fun doing this, we asked the teachers to act like the kids when they're coming in, try to dodge, duck, hide behind people, and do everything you could to get in without being able to get your temperature taken. We ran 82 at one of the sites that I was at where we run them through. We ran 82 people through in a minute and 13 seconds and never missed a single one. That was as fast as they could go through, trying to duck and hide and everything else, and got an accurate temperature reading on every one of the 82 of them in a minute and 13 seconds. So I don't think taking temperatures is going to be near the issue that we thought it would, as far as slowing kids up and having them waiting outside and those kinds of things. We can do 2 or 3 bus loads just like that, just as fast as they can walk in. We've done tests at virtually all the schools where they're set up and run. We've already tested them with all the staff, take all the staff out, have them come through multiple times to see how quickly and kind of get a feel for the parameters of that. A lot of the stuff that we started off originally, the sites, the temperature taking, the process for setting them aside for 2 to 3 minutes and then retaking their temperature and then going to the COVID, to the isolation room. All those things are still in play. Nothing really changed on that at this point. They have, if you know back and you look at the guidelines, when we first started talking about this, we were talking 72 hours. Go home for 72 hours, be temperature free for 72 hours. That's now 24 hours. The buses we were talking about were 6 feet spacing. Well, now they realize, and I'm questioning them on this, why is it safe to put 78 kids on a bus with masks, but you can't put 25 kids in a classroom with masks on? They said they only gave up the thing on the bus because they understood the logistics of getting that many kids to school, and they felt that was only a fair trade-off in order to get them to school. But when we get them to school for longer periods of time, we've got to space them out. So they're still standing by. Their expectation would be they would rather see 6 foot spacing on the bus. And that's why when you see with our athletic plans that came through KSHA and KDE, we still have to maintain the 6 feet. We're just talking every other seat staggered through the bus. So we're talking now 78 passenger bus to go to an athletic event, holds 11 students and 1 adult. So they're making us stick to the 6 foot spacing on buses for athletics and extracurriculars. However, to get transport students to school, they're allowing open windows, 3 inches, open hatches, and masks for everybody. And if somebody doesn't have a mask, then you got to create 6 feet between them. So we have masks on all the buses. we have hand sanitizers on the buses. So as they come on, everybody gets a hand sanitizer as soon as they enter the bus. Their temperatures, we have one of the documents that you have there is the assurance of health, the document that'll be in the back of school. The parents have, will look at this. They have to agree to check for those 4 things. It has to happen at home before they get on the bus. However, when they get to school, we're going to take their temperature again when they get to school. Even if the parent took it before they got on the bus, we're going to take it again when they get off the bus and come into school. Now, I have saw a couple of districts that are saying that during the day when they have lunch, when they're in person, they're going to run those students back through to take temperatures midday too, in case somebody develops a temperature during the day at school. They're also putting in part of their plan. That's something I haven't talked to everybody here about, but it's something I want to discuss. They are running them back through to check as they leave the food services area. They're checking temperatures even at midday. So they're getting temperatures taken twice in some of these locations.
Scott, I'm confused on here earlier, on your statement. Are you talking about possibly putting like 24 kids back in school 5 days, like in a classroom, if the 6 foot? I'm just saying, I know.
My question is, we need to get a ruling
Right.
on the 6 foot. I didn't say we ought to have 24 kids in the classroom.
Okay.
And I don't know, let's say that if you could have, I don't know, 20 kids in the classroom at 6 feet, I don't know what the number is at 5 feet.
Gotcha.
I don't know what it is, but we need, a lot of planning is going to go into answering that question.
I agree.
Is it just a recommendation to do the best you can, or is it an absolute thing? If it's an absolute, you've got to go down this path. But the recommendation, then it'll be a judgment call as to whether administration and school personnel think this room is safe. Now, let's be ridiculous. If you only have 1 foot between everybody, I think that's way past the end of the spectrum. Well, that's not a workable room. But if at 5.5 feet, that's an area that, as long as we answer the question, then maybe it is reasonable. And I think it's just my own personal opinion. I think it's going to be critical that we're able to maintain proper spacing around the teacher's desk. I think, we ought to put a special care to make sure that there's good spacing between where the first row of teachers is, where the first row of students are going to be and the teacher, because I think we want to make sure that we're doing, all that we can reasonably do to give distance to the instructor. So that's just my own.
Right now, that's at least 6 feet. In every room, it's at least 6 feet from the teacher station to the first student.
I would like to ask a question, a policy question, because it ties into mask also. I think we've discussed this at other meetings. Do you all need any additional policies from us to help put some more teeth into the mask policy? Because I could see how challenging it's going to be, and it would seem like if I was in your all's place, I'd love to have something saying, here's our policy, here's the consequences, and you can't be doing that, and boom. So if you all need something from us,
KDE is recommending no policy change for anything like that now. Principals are here. I defer, if you want to ask that of them, if their recommendation to us has been not to create policies that are COVID related.
I would say that in person just become a virtual person.
That's what we're saying. And that's what we put out in our documentation. First time, they're warned, you have to wear a mask. If there's a second time, parents are called, they'll pick them up and they'll be enrolled in the virtual.
And we're not trying to play semantics, but instead of saying policy
Yeah.
versus procedure, we were referring to it as protocol. So it's something that's protocol that we adopt internally so that we can tweak it as needed. But that's where we were going with that. But actually basically saying the 3 strikes, you move to virtual.
That sounds great. I'm just saying, if you all need some teeth, we're here to help, because that's going to be
I'll
one
talk
of the
more
critical
with principals
things.
as we move forward.
Have you given any thought to using maybe one of the professional services that we have to conduct a survey, the survey that will be used to get us back to in-person? And the only reason I ask is because I've had several parents say, well, I got a phone call after I completed my survey saying that they hadn't received it. So, and I just thought maybe one of those companies could help us ask the right questions, could help steer us in the right direction, gather that information.
We haven't discussed that, but we are just today really started working on the questions and what that was gonna look like, so we know that in the next day or two or so. I told them I would try to have a survey ready to present to the COVID group that meets again Thursday night at 6:30, that we would have a survey for them to look at, and then, I'll talk with my group. I don't know, we haven't really talked about having someone else do it for us. I even talked to a couple superintendents this afternoon, and I haven't even talked to my group about it, but they actually went back and conducted it at an in-school drive-through registration for those who wanted to return. So that it was kind of back on the parents to come by the school. They gave them the family assurance thing if they're going to come back. They signed up and told whether they wanted virtual. At the same time, you can find out if they need transportation. Ours is going to be, if we do it the way we looked at it, you ask a question, and basically after you give your student's name, what school, then you're asked a question, given the parameters of coming back, whatever that's going to look like at this point. We're talking an A/B, 2 days in, 3 days out, given that choice and meeting all the CDC, following all CDC guidelines. Would you choose this 2 days in hybrid or a virtual? If they choose the hybrid, when you click on the hybrid, it drops down to another question: do you need transportation? If you choose the virtual, it drops down: do you need lunch provided at home? So we get our food service and our transportation question answered off of their choice.
Sure. A lot of times they didn't hit submit correctly.
Okay.
So it might have just been an error on the person taking the survey.
Okay.
Because if they didn't hit submit, it didn't save itself in our data.
And the reason we called was we took every name that we had registered prior that we didn't get a survey back from and called them.
Yeah, they said they got a phone call, so that was good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think we've had a good discussion, and I appreciate y'all allowing us to have it. And I said it previously, but I look around this room, I'm coming towards the end of my 4-year term, and you got so many good people in this district, the principals and the administrators that are in this room, giving up their time at 7:42 on a school night, as we used to say. We just got great people, and I really appreciate them very much. I know we have honest disagreements, and sometimes it gets heated, but we really appreciate you all. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, so I just want to say thanks.
Item number 4, discussion and consider approval of allowing certain small groups of students to receive in-person instruction within district school buildings during remote learning periods. Scott Heisel.
Mr. Christie, this is just a housekeeping issue that I know you mentioned to us before that you've got some selected folks that are coming in, students. I think it's awesome, but I just want to make sure there wasn't a disconnect between our stated August 3rd, we're going to be in a virtual learning mode, and having those in. I don't know if you needed to have some specific approval from the board to allow you the discretion to bring people in as needed. I didn't want you to be caught in a trap there.
Well, we're bringing them in, and I want to clear up something. I misspoke, and I put Bridget Mann in a difficult situation with their SPED population. I got ahead of myself and said we had already started to run our bus routes for our SPED students, and we have not. I misspoke on that. That was my fault. I put her in a very awkward situation with some SPED students, some SPED families, and I've tried to talk to those families. We are now in the process. Wednesday, we'll start bringing SPED students. We're running bus routes like I talked about before. We will actually be running the bus routes on Wednesday and bringing those students in. The other students are students that are identified by teachers at the buildings.
Actually,
did I say it wrong again?
No, sir, you did not.
Correct me before I get out of here tonight.
Actually, we did have some students that were present in the schools today because we were able to have families to bring them in. So we had some very positive experiences with that. And in addition, I do know that some of the other students will actually be beginning as far as with transportation on Wednesday. So, we're looking towards providing more and more opportunities for our students that have needs so that they can get in and have services with staff.
Mr. Christie, what are the procedures for bringing students back in?
At this point, it's parents, the teachers through virtual contact, with the students that they,
Does the teacher have to get permission from their principal and from you?
I think they run that through their principals. The principals are aware of who's going to be coming in the building. The principals want to know who's in the building. But they don't run it through me. There's a protocol that they follow. They still have to go through the temperature taking. The same procedures are in place for them to come in. They're allowed to.
I'm more concerned about how that teacher gets that person back in. I'm thinking about the liability issues with the principal, and it goes into a little bit about what Mr. Heisel said when he brought this up. I got to thinking about it. We passed a distant learning program, is what we did, which didn't say anything about in person in that. And if somebody wants to come back in on that teacher because something happened in there and they're asking, where did you get permission to do this? Because I didn't see anything in a policy that, or procedure that you all passed that allowed you to have that back in. And just trying to protect teachers out there, I think there should be a procedure somewhere out there that's given to the principal, that's signed off by the principal, signed off by you or someone here that says that this is okay for this to happen. Otherwise, I think somebody could get left holding you back there. And I don't know, maybe our policy or what we passed the other day allows for that, but as a teacher, I would be very, very leery of calling somebody just on my own and asking them to come on in. As a principal, I would want to know, well, why did you pick Johnny, Susie, and this person and not this person? Because a struggling student can be anywhere from an FMD student or a kid learning to read to somebody, my kid's making a C in physics. So, I mean, those are different situations right there, and what is our procedure for that? The other thing that I keep hearing, I don't have transportation. Why do kids who have transportation, are they allowed to come back in? And I brought this up at a different time. We have to be careful about creating a private type school. And I want kids back in, but I don't want people to be disadvantaged. You know, if you're going to RDC and you live on Boone Avenue, well, that's great. If you're going to RDC and you live in Trapp, that's a different situation. And I think we have to make sure that we keep that in mind because there are going to be people out there, you know, the way the climate is right now, are going to say, that student got to go back, I need to go back because of this. And I think it's more than just having students in the buildings. There has to be a good protocol for why they're in the building and why somebody else is not in the building or didn't get the opportunity to get back in the building.
The conversation with the principals has been that the expectation or the ability is there that if a student that they recognize is struggling based on the virtual classroom instruction, that would benefit from some in-person, that they have that ability to talk to that person in person. And I'm assuming that goes to the principals. The principals are made aware when people are coming into the buildings. So they're aware of it. Now, the instructions that's been given to the principals, if we come into the case where there's somebody who's in dire need of help and they don't have transportation, we got 2 or 3 options. We have money that's been set aside, and I hate putting it out like this, but we'll be inundated now with this, but we've got taxis, but we have money set aside for programs that will pay for that. I've even said that if we've got a student that is in dire need of help and they can't provide transportation, to let me know, and Mr. Nichols and I will get a bus to go get them. Because we're running buses routes all over the county right now. We'll have a bus pick them up, bring them in. They're limited to only 2 hours maximum in the building as it is. That's all, and they're only limited to 14, bring in 14. So it's not large numbers, and it's just purely students in need. And
Can
now,
we get a rundown maybe next week of how many of those people will be transported or how many people want to be transported, could not get transportation? Or I'm just worried about 2 things. One, I worry about making sure there's a procedure that teachers follow to get students back in. And you know, stuff happens, I'm not saying it will, but stuff happens. Well, that teacher had class, their 2 kids came to their class. You know, those things happen in districts, we know that. And that's why I say if we don't have some sort of procedure that goes through that principal that can allow for those types of things to happen, or their neighbor's kid gets to go in, or something like that. Those are the things that are going to come back and create problems for us if we don't address them before those students come back in. fine, if we think what we passed the other day allows for in-school, for in-person, I'm okay with it. I mean, I like to
We
hear
have the
what-
guidelines as from CDC, KDE about what's permitted.
That's what I'm saying, you know, when we passed it, we passed distance learning, and I know our NTI program allows for in-student, but we didn't pass what we call NTI at that time. We passed distant learning. And that's the only part that bothers me on a liability situation from a teacher that asks somebody else to come in. But I'd like to hear what other board members feel about that situation.
So you think we need to agree tonight?
I mean, you know, I'm just thinking what we passed. I mean, when I look at, you know, the way the motion was made was to approve distance learning for the first 9 weeks. Distance learning. Now, we didn't have a plan that night that said distance learning. There was no plan in front of us at that time. Now, there is an NTI plan. Is distance learning the NTI plan? That's, you know, and maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but is there a liability issue with a teacher that asks somebody to come in?
Well, I would think that I would want to make that clear for a teacher to have the students in that she felt like he or she needed to have. So if we have to clear that up tonight.
And do we think logically that should flow from the teacher up to the principal level? The principal should be deciding that, I mean, discussing it. And
I've got principals here, that's, you know,
That's what I would like, I'll just be honest with you. And I had kids in my building, so I'll admit that too. As part of our phase system with our special needs population, meet their needs with their IEP. I'm also liable if I can't meet their goals in the services with adaptive skills and things like that. So if there's a possibility, I know I have talked to some of you guys, I know some of you guys have told me that, but I'm going to put our kids' needs first. And if I'm sued, I'm sued. My teachers had it approved by me, so there is no, at least in my case, the teacher didn't go rogue. That's on me.
Mr. Hart, I would think that the ARC meeting would supersede anything else that we do, correct? Am I?
That they
am I
approved
correct in
the
that?
live document, which is the individual education plan.
I mean, if it says in the ARC minutes you'll be in school, then I don't think,
we have to meet that.
There's
I don't think we
resources.
can overrule that,
Sure.
right? I don't, that's the way I understand it, Ms. Mann, or you?
Well,
Mr.
there is
Thomas,
guidance regarding supplemental services for special education and the early learning instruction for intervention. And that is very specific in that you are permitted to have supplemental supports for the needs of individual students in order to address. Now, that is not direct instruction, that is supplemental to their individual needs. So, prime example, you mentioned FMG. So if we're talking about a moderate severe population of children, those children typically have not only cognitive, adaptive, and social, emotional, as well as other functional skills. To do that in a virtual setting is not necessarily the most appropriate avenue to deliver those services. To do something in a structure in which we can provide that, and if parents are in agreement, deliver that instruction and in person, so therefore those supports are not diminished, because if you think about it, we're going on, what, 7-8 months of nothing in regards to that. I mean, we have community programs that are not even providing those services for individuals that fall in those categories of needs. So I guess the argument might very well be, do we provide supplemental instruction for children of needs or not?
I think if you don't, I mean, you can't go against the ARC of what it says in there. I mean, we've got to be able to show, I mean, that's big time when you start talking federal law there. If it's in the ARC meeting that they're going to be in school for a certain amount of time, then they have to be in school for a certain amount of time. That's just what the ARC is going to tell us there.
And
You know, I think more, I understand the ARC or whatever, but I think even that has to go through the principal. I'm more worried about a teacher just saying, you know, Johnny is not doing real well in algebra right now. I want that person to come back in. Principal has no idea that person goes in there. And I don't know if we have a form or you know, but I do think that there needs to be some sort of procedure, and I don't know if the board needs to approve it, or we think this is already in here, that's going to allow for that to happen. I mean, again, I think it could be a huge liability issue on the part of the teacher, and when somebody comes in and asks them, well, why did you bring them back? Well, they said we bring students back in. I don't think that's going to fly too well.
So, Mr. Peridot, this may or may not alleviate your concerns, but we do have kind of a guidance document that we created internally within our district based on the guidance that we received from KDE, in which that kind of looks at helping us to identify appropriate services, how to look at following their structure. We created a schedule which also adheres to the expectations, where we clearly define the expectations of students, what to expect as far as upon arrival, staff requirements, as well as then the expectations of making sure that we have certain documents in hand, such as being able to have consent to deliver health services. So with this is part of the conversation that was developed through our special population subcommittee of the reentry. And so with that, hopefully it's a component that, you know, that we have administrators on this task force or this committee to do that. And then in addition to, these are conversations that are not only that take place amongst our facilitators, but also with our teachers, as they also then too go back with the building of principals. But if there is a concern, I would be glad to address that.
I think what Mr. Peridot was talking about, I think you're fine with that part.
I'm fine with
You're fine with the sped part. I understand what you're saying.
I understand.
You're talking about
I've dealt with
outside
ours
the
before, and I
sped.
know what they say. They always told me what to do. I know what ours does.
Yeah.
What I'm worried about is other situations
Yeah.
out there that crop up, and how that teacher knows it's okay, and that principal knows in that building it's okay. Therefore, you know, if you're protecting the district and the Board of Education by knowing that the people that come back in that building have been cleared by that building principal, and there is a proper reason for them to be in there. And again, I want to keep harping on a little bit, making sure that those students that don't have transportation have an opportunity to get back in there.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sir.
So our August 3rd motion said that we approved distance learning for the first 9 weeks. Would you say that even though we approved distance learning, that did not preclude us being able to bring selected students in as needed? So is it a distance learning only implied, or is it just simply we approved to allow distance learning?
If you want to cut to the chase, I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if you voted tonight to authorize them to bring in students.
Okay, we might be working on that wording then. So, I mean, we'll work on that wording, and then I guess the other thing is we need to decide who's going to approve that. It seemed like what we're talking about is based upon the principal's approval. Is that?
Well, what does it say in our NTI plan? Is it easier for us to say we're going to approve distance learning via our NTI plan, and that covers it? I know it allows for students to come back in. I'm not sure that it asks teachers to ask principal for permission.
Do the principals today know if there's any students and how many are in the building at any one time?
Yes. We
Okay.
have a school spreadsheet at Justice, and by Friday of every week, everyone has to put in their work hours for the next 5 days, because they're on some flexible hours now, and which students and what times they'll be receiving them as they come into the building. The whole staff can see it.
Okay.
Something like that would be really nice to have district-wide, instead of each school doing their own thing. Only because as a parent, I think, and if you have children at different stages, that it would be so much easier that it be something unified as a district and not each school does their own thing.
But I don't know if I follow. Each principal would need to know.
Yeah, you need to do what.
Each principal would need to know.
Best way for your building to communicate.
Right,
That's
but I
what
think
works for
as
us.
a parent, if you've got children at Justice, and you've got children at RDC, and you've got children at GRC, it would be nice to know the format that you would need to go if your child needed help.
Oh, our teachers communicated that with parents up front. That was set up early on. I think that every parent knows, we've made it all well known that when they can reach us, what modes they can reach us through, what hours they can reach us.
Well, I know I've had several emails saying that that's,
Yeah,
and it's not the case, it's not district-wide.
I
And
see what Sherry's saying, because like whenever I have other people come to me and they're telling me stuff, well, my experience with what's going on at Justice with you is not what other people are having in other elementary schools.
Right,
So, like, I get what you're saying, but I know it's hard to explain.
yeah.
It would be nice if everybody was doing the, kind of along the same line, so that way, it's creating a lot of confusion. And we don't know what to say when they are coming to us.
Yeah, because I don't know exactly what you're doing, I don't know what's
Right.
going on at some of the other schools, so.
So you're asking for the same procedure that every school should follow? They should follow the same procedure?
Correct,
basically.
yeah. I just think that if you have a child that needs attention, that teacher goes to the principal and says, look, I'm gonna have this child here 3 days a week for an hour, or something along that line.
Like, one of the things we had that reaching out with us, but then, and I had another school saying, or supposedly, well, we're not bringing kids in yet, I don't know if you got
Right,
that, we're not
yes.
doing that. Like, that's what we were hearing on our end, is that was the problem.
Could I suggest that
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we can take a 5-minute break, and these smart people over here, and in conjunction with the principals, could come up with a policy that they would like for us to pass, that would be helpful for them, and would be fair for everybody involved, and would, give them some legal support. Does that sound like a reasonable plan? But I don't want to keep people too long, I just, I'll give you all 5 minutes to chat among yourselves and come up with something.
Here, in number 6, in the NTI plan that was passed, it was passed to state online participation, methods to be used by teachers include class reminder apps, telephone calls, Infinite Campus Messenger, and emails. When applicable and safe, teachers may meet with students in person. And that was our NTI plan. It was passed, I think it was June 13th.
That's what I'm saying, we need to put NTI in here, and who determines what's applicable? Does the principal determine that? That's the only thing I just believe the teacher has to submit something to the principal has to sign off on it. But I think we could go and say, if we can insert the NTI plan into this, I think we're better off, and I'll refer to Mr. Thomas on his thinking. I'm all right with taking a little break if you want to, while they try to come up and present that back to us.
All right, 5-minute break.
We got second meeting tomorrow, Susan, we got principal meeting tomorrow, you want to implement your protocol, principal meeting?
No,
You want to implement your
Session at 8:13. Mr. Heisel, here, I need to turn it back to you again.
Yeah, I guess there any further discussion, otherwise, these fine gentlemen have developed a prototype motion.
I think we're waiting on you.
Okay, so I'd like to move that we incorporate the state-approved NTI plan for the district as it relates to bringing students into the building as needed during distance learning periods.
I'll second. Can we have discussion?
Huh? What?
I said I'll second and then have discussion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Heisel, second by Mr. Pearson.
And my questions would be, does the NTI plan cover transportation and cover principals having knowledge of what's going on?
We'll cover the principals having knowledge. I know that the NTI talks about transportation, but,
I still think that's a big worry that we're going to have if we don't find a way to get students who need transportation to school. If we're allowing people to come in, I think that's still a huge problem with most. I think it's great that we can throw the NDI in there and that covers all of the other stuff, but I'm really concerned about those people that don't have the ability, whether they're two working parents and want their kids there, they can't walk there, or young kids and they live out in the district and need to get there.
Would you say that in the district would provide transportation as needed?
Something along the lines of district transportation will be reviewed case by case.
that's kind of what we're doing. That's what we are doing.
I think we should put it in there, in that situation there, and that way parent knows there's a possibility, and then if they don't get, then I guess then their channels are going back through to the principal about why wasn't I approved transportation, then it goes to you, and then eventually on to us. It seems to get those processes messed up, most things start to come to us and not to the other things.
I would just like to say that, just remember that we're still delivering meals during the day, and we don't have so many buses, so many drivers with the special needs routes that we will be running. There's a limited amount of transporting students that we can do, so there should be sort of a number set on any given day. I don't know what that number is.
Well, I think you have to review it. I don't think we can sit here and say, I mean, if we're talking about a bus driver taking pizza and corn to somebody, or somebody picking somebody up so they're struggling in school, that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. But I just think if we had to put something in there about reviewing it, that way that parent has an answer for why their child cannot be picked up at this time, and why this child is picked up at this time.
Is the wording supplemental to that? District transportation needs will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Was that your wording?
Does that sound reasonable?
That's fine.
Everybody?
Okay, so I would like to add that as a supplement, the second sentence, that district transportation needs will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
And I'll continue with the second.
Okay. Any other tweaks, Steve?
Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Pearson. He's ready to run.
I'll second.
We're going to finish you tonight.
Second by Mr. Richardson. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
So you're bringing me?
Josh, I'm
asking you what you need now.
Huh?